What about Joe Montana going back to San Francisco? ESPN's Chris Mortensen reporting that Niners owner Eddie DeBartolo has asked Montana to reconsider his trade demand, suggesting that he might still have a chance at the Niners' starting job. Why? Mortensen says San Francisco has been disappointed in what teams like Phoenix, KC, and now Detroit are offering in a Montana deal. The Chiefs willing to cough up no more than a third-round pick for Joe.
Kansas City is still in the chase for Joe Montana. A day after the Lions said no about Joe, his current team publicly announced, "We want you back."
We would like Joe to stay. We'd like him to be part of the organization. I think that people talk about it complicating the matters, how many quarterbacks you have and the competition, how it affects a team and so forth. But the competition and having the best players is the most important thing to the team and to the organization. It's better than that other situation where you don't have good football players. At the same time, we want to be sensitive to Joe's feelings, certainly. And we've addressed those and will continue to until ultimately a decision's made.
Well, Seifert comments don't exactly match those of Bill Bidwell, the Phoenix Cardinal owner, who was quoted today as saying he believes the Cards have come to some sort of an agreement with the Niners about Montana. Montana was in Phoenix today. He worked out, met with the Cardinal coaching staff, and said that he, Montana, hopes to make a decision by Saturday. Start the
offense. His previous offensive coordinator, Paul Hackett, is here. I think he is impressed that this football team has won for 4 consecutive years and been in 3 consecutive playoffs.
He's not going to have the opportunity in San Francisco to compete for the starting job, and he wants the opportunity to come here to Kansas City, where he thinks he can take this team to a Super Bowl.
I think with the addition of Joe Montana, it gives us a different element. It gives us somebody who's experienced, somebody who's been there, somebody who knows how to win when the game's on the line.
That's all well and good, but herein lies the rub. KC has only offered the 49ers a third-round draft choice as compensation, while the Cardinals, who are the other serious Montana suitors, have offered a first-rounder. And Paul, 49ers team president, again says this is very far from a done deal.
Well, Carmen Policy is continuing to try to work out the deal, and he says things have broken down as well. But Montana is spending the weekend with team owner Eddie DeBartolo at his home in Youngstown, Ohio, and DeBartolo policy could override that of the team president before this is all said and done.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. The special relationship between the two, DeBartolo and Montana, dating back several years, obviously, and that could very well be the deciding factor, a personal thing, an emotional thing that decides this factor at the end. And Montana could go for less than market value because of that relationship.
Some deals are made with the heart rather than the head, but what about Montana and his health? He hasn't played for most of the last 2 years with the elbow injury, but he did play in a meaningless Monday night game against the Lions at the end of the year. Looked pretty good there, of course, has worked out extensively for both the Chiefs and the Cardinals, and Montana says the elbow is okay. Team officials in both teams seem to think the elbow is okay, so you got to think, if all of those people say it's okay, Joe in particular, hey, it must be okay.
Except you got to wonder again, when is the right time to hang it up? Like many before him, they faced this dilemma. When is the right time to hang it up? Several of the game's biggest stars have finished their careers in less than stellar fashion. Joe Namath, Johnny Unitas, and O.J. Simpson, to name a few. But Montana feels he's still fully capable of leading a team to the championship. We'll find out which team, I guess, sometime this week.
But you know what, Nancy, I can't help but think that the Montana situation is more like Y.A. Tittle or Jim Plunkett, who were traded late in their careers and still had success, rather than, say, the banged-up and extremely injured Joe Namath or old Johnny Unitas. But we'll see.
We'll see. It'll be great to see Joe back in action in either way.
Clear to Joe Montana they want him to stay, and basically they gave him everything that he's asked for. Joe wanted a chance to compete for the starting job. He got more than a chance. He was told, you are the starting quarterback. They can't do anything more for Joe than that. They've offered him the money. They've offered him the position on the team. Now Joe says, I've made up my mind. I want to go to Kansas City. So I think from the standpoint of the 49ers, they're off the hook in trading Joe Montana. But again, this thing is still a mess, and it will continue to be a mess until the Chiefs and the 49ers have a meeting of minds.
Fred Edelstein on Joe Montana, the inside story, day 37 or whatever it is. We thank you. Thanks, Fred.
Thank you.
So here's what the Niners want from KC as ransom for Joe. This year's first-round pick, number 18 overall. Next year's third-rounder, Chiefs would get Montana and an unnamed backup safety, and the Niners' fourth-rounder this year. A second note, Montana said today that he never asked Eddie DeBartolo or anybody in the Niners front office to name him the starting quarterback. He just wanted a shot at the job. thirdly, if and when the KC deal is cleared up, the next controversy is ready right behind it. In Kansas City, Montana's uniform number 16 is retired for Len Dawson. His college uniform number 3 is also retired for Jan Stenerud. Dawson tells SportsCenter tonight he might agree to let Montana use the number, that Joe should make him an offer. There are 8 Hall of Fame quarterbacks who spent their entire careers with just one team apiece, from Terry Bradshaw and Roger Staubach to Sammy Baugh and Sid Luckman. At this hour, Joe Montana could still become number 9, but don't bet on it. Players move on, that's life. But in San Francisco, seemingly more so than anywhere else in the NFL, when a great one moves on, he moves on to greater things that haunt the Niners. In fact, the confusion about Montana, Young, and Bono has already brought deja vu to the most senior of Niner followers. So with all the San Francisco stars who have gone literally before, how easily could you make Montana an ex-49er? If and when it happens, Joe goes to the Hall of Fame traded late club. Johnny Unitas of the Chargers, Tittle, who we mentioned, Joe Namath, whose knees were as hollow as wiffle balls by the time he got to L.A., Arnie Herber, the Green Bay native who went from the Packers to the Giants at the age of 34, and the most successful late change of address, Norm Van Brocklin, traded by the Rams at age 32, led the Eagles to the title at 34 and retired at 35.
Certainly makes it easy if you're going to trade Joe and you have Steve Young there, even Steve Bono. So I don't think that hurts as much. But if Joe wants to go, I see no reason why they would want to keep him.
But it's the same thing as 1961 all over again, at least in some respects. You got the same players, same type of players, John Brody's, Steve Young, I think.
Number 16, worn by Len Dawson, is retired. So is number 3, the number Montana wore at Notre Dame. Number 3 was the jersey worn by Jan Stenerud. Montana becomes the first big-name quarterback to call the signals for the Chiefs since Len Dawson retired 18 years ago. The Chiefs are hoping that Montana can take them places that only Dawson has in the history of the franchise. Chris.
So meanwhile, the Niners offense is Steve Young's to run, assuming they can now sign him. A league MVP will not open training camp as a backup for maybe the first time in history. But the last-ditch offer to make Montana the designated starter has unsettled some Niners. Jerry Rice spoke out, and it's opened George Seifert to criticism for waffling. He joked about it today.
In fact, I felt fine until my daughter said to me this morning, maybe she should get married right away so she could change her name. I don't
I was honored and I was shocked that, to say the least, I think I had a couple quick beers.
This situation is about as unique as it can be, and the reasons for my change, it was got to a situation where I felt that maybe some of the plans for the future might have to be put on hold. Some of Steve's plans, some of my plans might have to be put on hold, but would be justified by the fact that we'd be asking Joe to stay. I don't feel dishonest about the change. I can speak with Steve openly about it, and I think as long as I can do that, then we'll be able to go forward and do the things that we have to accomplish as a football team. And his relationship with me will be such that we'll be able to function and work together.
Steve Young, through his agent, had indicated that under no circumstances did Steve Young want to go elsewhere, nor would he go elsewhere. And if there was an attempt to trade Steve from the San Francisco 49ers, he would seriously consider retirement.